I took that hit, and it was a very big hit, and immediately was somewhere else. And I kept hearing this voice that just kept saying, "You're going to die, but it's okay. You're going to die, but it's okay." And it just felt like eons, but it was only like 30 seconds. Once I was, oh yeah, of course I'm going to die. We all die. Like, that's fine. That's normal. That's what happens, right? And I can move on. I immediately heard the crazy jungle chanting shaman music, and I moved on. Like, this door opened up, right? Like, in the middle of nowhere, and I could just go through, and I went to the other side, I guess you could say, but it wasn't that I felt like I was already in the other side, but I guess you could call it like a limbo. And I saw, it's indescribable. Saw is not the right word. Again, it's more like you're feeling everything, just like a wave of everything that's possible.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the DP podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Pinto, and joining me today is a new friend, recent friend that I made where I work. I'll just leave him as Eli because I don't know if he wants to have his full name announced or not. But what's up, Eli? What do you do exactly? Or actually, let's just talk about how we met.
Okay. Yeah. So I work at a grocery store, and it's a kosher grocery store. So I'm the kosher supervisor, I guess you could say. And there's a Hebrew word for that. It's mishgiach.
Okay. And for those listening, you're Jewish.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I met you because you work security at the plaza where that store is.
Yeah, and I think we met the beginning of December. We started talking to each other because you were just being very friendly. You were very friendly. You were like, oh, if you ever need anything, just let me know. Like, I don't know, a drink or a soda or something. I was like, oh, that's nice of him. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. If I ever need it, like, cool. And then I came in once and I got some food, but like you were on your break. But anyways, we started talking some more, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, over time, little by little, yeah.
Yeah, and then we ended up finding out that we listened to the same podcast, more or less.
Yeah, we have very similar taste. It's surprising.
Yeah, and so then, like, one of the things that I was, like, immediately asking you was, like, hey, man, you ever done any hallucinogenics, you know? And you're like, oh, actually, I just did DMT.
Yeah, it's interesting how things like that sometimes line up.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a drug that's always really fascinated me for, like, I don't know, captured my imagination probably the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it is a fascinating thing.
Stay a little close to the mic.
It's a fascinating substance, you know. It's unlike most hallucinogens and psychedelics in that you make it naturally in your own body, right? And that's always been fascinating, to say the least. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you make it in your brain, you make it in your liver. And
as far as I know, yes, yeah. But I think there's more research to be done in how it all works and what it's for and everything. But from my experience, it's just indescribable. It's just something that, if you had to put it into words, it's just otherworldly. It's something I think most people should see for themselves if they can muster the courage.
Oh, okay. But it's kind of a hard substance to come by. But I mean, one thing I immediately asked you was like, man, because I hear so much from people that it's and on podcasts like that we listen to, that it's so hard for people to describe what they saw or what exactly happened. So the immediate thing I said was like, hey man, what did you see? What can you describe? And you said the same thing, like, oh, I can't really describe it with words. But
so
what was the setting exactly for how you did it? You know,
kind of like
can you go run down just kind of like just in your room?
Yeah, with 3 or more like 5 other people actually, which I should have maybe kept it a little smaller because it was a little boisterous the first time. But so that maybe took me out of the experience a little bit. But it's still hard to be connected to like where you are when you're somewhere else. It's hard to put into words. But if I had to describe it, it's kind of like trying to describe the shadow of something to someone who can't see. It's really hard, but if you've ever seen something like Flatlanders with Carl Sagan, where he's trying to describe the fourth dimension, it feels like that's what you're trying to do. It's just really, really hard to wrap your brain around it. But
So how did you take it? Like, was it like to get
the
that
first
to get,
time,
like, what was that experience?
so if I don't know how much you've looked into it, but everyone seems to agree that you need to take 3 when you do it to like break through. That's the term, break
like
through.
inhale 3 times.
Yeah, like
I've
take
heard the
3
same thing.
hits. Yeah, and I recommend looking into this series called Tales from the Trip. It's really great at explaining the experiences people have had and the like overlap and the weird connections. And
What can you see it on?
I think YouTube probably, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Comedy Central maybe, yeah. But honestly, the first time I did it, I took it out of a bong, this bong actually, and
okay.
yeah. My friend held me out. He told me to get some screens, which is just like a mesh you put in a bowl, and then just pack it on there. Get a torch, and then just inhale, hold it in, exhale, and do that 3 times. I needed help with the last 2 because on the exhale I was somewhere else, but got through it. And if I had to describe the trip, I think I told you about it, right?
Yeah, you did tell me because I was asking. Yeah, I was like, yo, what's going on? Because I'm very curious. Like, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. If you've ever done any psychedelics, it's unlike them in that it's very, very short. It's only like 5-10 minutes.
The experience lasts.
Yeah.
From the third inhalation?
Yeah, or maybe like a minute, because it only takes you like 30 seconds to take the 3 hits. Yeah, and then you're there. Because I looked it up, and there've been some studies that show that the first 30 seconds are the most important, because after that you start to build up a little bit of a tolerance, and then you need more and more to
to break through.
Exactly. So you take the 3 really fast.
So your tolerance goes up like immediately.
Yeah, but after I think about 2 weeks, you're back to like baseline for the most part, I believe. And it's unlike things like ayahuasca in that you don't need like to take an MAOI inhibitor to experience it. You're just.
And what's that?
Like ayahuasca is the substance that you drink, and you take it with, I believe it's a root that they grind up, right? So it inhibits monooxidase, and that's why it's called a monooxidase inhibitor. And that prevents your body from breaking down DMT once it's in your system. So that's how you trip when you take like ayahuasca, which interestingly enough, I believe 3 cups is what's recommended for like a really big trip. Yeah, for like a good.
You have to drink 3 full cups, and then it's like boom.
I don't think it's like you have to, but it's what the tradition is. It's like recommended, I believe. If you can do it, you should do it. Oh. And it's the same with smoking it. And I always thought that was an interesting thing. 3 is a big number for some reason.
Is this your religious side coming out?
No, it's not religious, but there is a sort of like religious vibe to the experience, if I had to say, for me personally, because I honestly think there's no way to describe it other than it's like a divine substance. It just feels like you're experiencing something sublime.
So what did you see on your first time?
Interestingly enough, it was a bit of a contrast to what I'm talking about now, in the sense that I felt like I met what most people would call the devil. And I know that sounds like a crazy thing to say, but the whole experience was this other type of entity from us, humanoid, but just like just a menacing sort of overall person, right? Not unnatural or scary or frightening, but just kind of like different, and like pointy features, like sharp ears, sharp teeth, squinty, kind of like very sharp eyes with like, it's hard to like faceted, almost like gems, just very.
Did they look like crystal clear to you?
Everything is more vivid. Like every trip I've had kind of feels more real than when I'm just experiencing natural reality,
Do you feel like it's calling out to you to be like, oh, do it again so you can be even closer?
No, but I have one friend that is like that, and I've told you about him. He's an interesting case.
We'll go into that in a second. So wait, go back to your story.
So meeting the devil, as I call him, it was meeting someone who seemed to know everything. And when I say that, I mean, the time you're there, it's only a few minutes, but it's like eons. And this entity seemed to me to know everything, do anything in that realm, right? And went on to tell me that free will was something he had given humans because he has a bet with God that humans can't be good if they have free will, that they will always choose to do bad. And so that he was testing humans to prove God wrong. And I always thought that that was a weird thing for my brain to come up with on its own. I don't know, but maybe it's the substance, maybe, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I came away with it thinking like free will is a really interesting concept, and I've been delving into it a lot further ever since, but no one really can pin it quite down, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. And I asked you this after I asked what your trips were like, but what do you feel like a lot of what you saw was influenced from outside things, from your subconscious, such as like your background growing up or things you may have already heard?
For sure, because every trip has what I think is called like a cultural bias, you know? Like my one friend had the trip where he just saw fire spirits everywhere. And I think that's a cultural, maybe, imprint, if you will. And then another friend had like, you know, dancers. And interestingly enough, the overlap between all of us is we all kind of feel like we met several entities at different points. And we always see like animal like figures.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like one overlap.
But you said you had 3 trips. So what was the third one? That I remember that you said you had one where you saw the universe.
The third one, well, that time I dabbed it. So that's when you take a water pipe and you get what's called usually a nail, where you torch it up, you get the nail very, very, very hot, and you vaporize or dab the substance, in this case DMT, right?
Mm-hmm.
So did that 3 times in sequence very quickly. And before I exhaled this time, I was somewhere else. I don't know how I did it, but I did. And aside from the visuals, which truly are indescribable, like words just cannot do them justice. It's fractal, like geometry.
Were there colors that didn't exist, or?
Yes and no, because I feel like how can someone picture colors they've never seen, right? It almost feels like my brain couldn't come up with what it was trying to process.
Seems so crazy to me.
It is, because it was crazy to everyone who I've talked to and everyone who's talked about it, I feel like. But mind-bogglingly, while you're going through it, it doesn't feel wrong. It doesn't feel terrifying, maybe awe-inspiring, right? But it's not unnatural. I don't know how to put it, because it feels almost like, oh, this makes sense. Oh, this is right. Like, oh, I get this. I've been here, kind of. Like, it's familiar, nostalgic, maybe. And then, yeah, because a lot of people will say that it's similar in a way to like dreaming or having a near-death experience, and I think that's very accurate. And that's maybe some of the reason why we have those experiences at all. But I'm not a scientist, so I can't say for sure.
And like, I feel like normal people listening to this are like, dude, that sounds like a scary fucking drug.
It's scary
it's like
if you're scared.
Of like, what the hell is this shit?
It's scary if you're scared of something very out of the ordinary, very indescribable, something that you cannot kind of only, you're the only one who knows what you saw and experienced, and I feel like saw is not even the right word, but went through, something you went through and came back with, right? And you're more wise, I want to say, because you can't come back from that and be like, oh, that was nothing. That was just whatever, right? Like, that was just like smoking a bowl of pot. Oh, whatever. No, it's something very different. It's something I feel like people need to treat with respect and intrigue, if I'm being completely honest.
And it's crazy to me that it just like, as soon as you exhale or while you're inhaling,
it's very
you
fast.
Instantly travel to another dimension.
Especially, I have to say, dabbing it or vaporizing it was much more abrupt.
Something I remember you telling me too was that you felt that place was more real than here. And I said, so did that make you feel, because you hear so many people like Elon Musk and a bunch of other people being like, oh, you're in a simulation.
Yes, that's something I feel like I'm hearing more and more every day. And it's not something that I think is outside the realm of possibility. Like, if you've ever watched, I forget his name, but there's a few actually prominent scientists who believe that this is a simulation and that um, given the time and the probability of us creating something that could create a simulation, how do we know we're not in one already? Right? And Elon always said he wants to know what's outside the simulation. And so to that, I say maybe he should try DMT, but
Maybe he already has.
maybe he already has and he already knows, and that's why he's Elon. But maybe he's just a better Elon for it. Who's to say?
Mhm. So would it be something you try again, or is it, hey, I'm gonna hold off on that? Because something that also we talked about was LSD, but we'll get into that before you answer that question.
So I'll probably no, I'll do it again. It's just a matter of the right timing because it's not something you want to do all of the time. Although my friend would disagree, but it's something that again I feel you need to treat with respect because it's something that is not. It's not a party drug. You know, you can't take it and do stuff. You can't like really communicate while you're on it. You're not here. You're aware maybe if you don't take enough that you're on a substance, but if you break through, you're experiencing another. It's almost like another you somewhere else in another dimension. It's very hard to describe, but while you're there, it's not that crazy. You're just kind of in awe and trying to process everything. Whatever much of it you can hold on to is like you're just trying to grab all these diamonds, but they're just flying by you, right? It's too much. And when you come back, you don't feel drained, you don't feel tired, or at least I didn't, my friends didn't. We all felt energized and more like wow,
Like
this is
reborn.
yes, in a way. In a way, yes. But the craziest part was how hard it was for someone who hadn't experienced it to kind of be like, oh, I get it, right? But if you've done it and someone talks about it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
And I've heard like that they say, oh, you have like a DMT trip right before you die. And I've been, I don't know why, but maybe in the last couple months, I've been contemplating death more.
These days, I'm sure you're not the only one.
Yeah, right. But just like the concept of it, and it just like lights out, and it's just like, ooh, just gives me a very
a lot of people believe that too.
Feeling.
Yeah.
So just like that point of just end, like, you know, I don't know, did DMT at all affect you? Because I think in your first trip you said that.
Did I tell you about my second trip?
Was that your second trip? Talk about that, man.
Yeah.
What's up? Because I'm very curious about what you think after having a DMT trip. If it talked about that, because I know a lot of people take it and it helps them get over things like that's traumatic.
If you have post-traumatic stress or any kind of deep-seated trauma of any sort, any kind of like guilt or just anything that eats away at the back of your mind, that's always something that'll come out. And that's why it's not for everyone at every time. It's something that if you do, you should again treat it right. It's gonna show you some things you might not want to see, but you need to deal with, right? And then when you're back, you'll be like, oh, okay, I accept this and I can move forward. So when I did it, as you said, I was also dealing with like the sense of mortality was kind of pervasive in everyday life. And, every day you hear about another death, another number, another case, another this, another that. And I guess I was a bit in denial about...
I think for me, it's just more getting... Sorry to interrupt, but I think for me, it's not even that about like COVID. It's more about just me getting older and just thinking like, yeah, like...
For sure,
okay,
that
now
as
I have
well.
to start thinking about
I wouldn't say
what
it
am I
was
doing,
any one thing, but that more than anything, for sure. Just the constant unease that we've been dealing with every day, because I see it a lot every day. And when you're constantly dealing with that, it starts to kind of become
it's like
draining.
pounding at you.
Yeah, it's draining at you and draining you. And then on top of that, no one's getting younger. We're all getting older. That's something that weighs on everyone, I think, and it's something we all deal with. And, everyone at some point loses someone, and then you start thinking about mortality in your own life and how it's going to affect those around you. And maybe it wasn't the best time for me to do DMT, but because I did, the denial that I was in, that like it couldn't affect those near me or myself. I had to kind of accept that it can, and it's a thing that can happen to anyone at any time. And the denial around that kind of went away immediately in less than a minute of doing DMT, which is mind-boggling to me that I was in denial for all this time, like almost Peter Pan syndrome.
Is that what your second trip was about?
Literally, yes. So
what happened in there?
my friends had the idea that I should dab it this time, vape it. This was the first time I had vaped it, because the first time I'd done it, this was the second time I had smoked it in a bowl. The second time, I thought it would be a good idea to do this vaporization method. And before I did it, they played some, I guess you could call it like tribal, almost jungle music. Just a lot of like vocals and chanting and drums and strange wind instruments. And it had a very like shamany vibe, if I had to say. And I took that hit, and it was a very big hit. And immediately was somewhere else. And if I had to describe it, I would say it was sort of a grassy limbo, right? Like just like big plains of nothing, right? And I kept hearing this voice that, not the chanting or anything, not the music, just this voice that just kept saying, "You're going to die, but it's okay. You're going to die, but it's okay." And they didn't say when or why or how, no matter how much I asked or thought or, pondered. And it just felt like eons. But it was only like 30 seconds, which in hindsight is a strange concept in and of itself, right? Like, how does that time dilation occur? But once I was pondered it enough and had been like, oh yeah, of course I'm going to die. We all die. Like, that's fine. That's normal. That's what happens, right? And I can move on. I immediately heard the crazy jungle chanting shaman music, and I moved on. Like, this door opened up, right? Like in the middle of nowhere, and I could just go through, and I went to the other side, I guess you could say, but it wasn't that I felt like I was already in the other side, but I guess you could call it like a limbo. And I saw, it's indescribable. Saw is not the right word. Again, it's more like you're feeling everything. Just like a wave of everything that's possible. And it was kind of too much for what I thought it was going to be, because my first time, smoking it compared to vaping it, it's completely different. It's like, I don't know, maybe for the audience, like pot smoking would be a good analogy, because if you've ever taken a regular bong rip, right? It's one thing. But if you take a dab, right? It's different. But even that's not a good analogy, because a dab of wax is concentrated, right?
Yeah.
DMT, you're taking the same substance and you're just heating it a different way. You're just vaporizing it as opposed to smoking it. And you're utilizing so much more of it by doing that it immediately gets into your system. Getting it into your system that rapidly by vaporizing it just is not comparable to other methods of taking it, I think, other than maybe, I don't know, if someone injected it, which I don't know if that's even possible. But I think the research on it will be fascinating in the future. Yeah. It's undeniable.
Yeah. Well, I saw there was some scientist that, I forgot his name. I wish I could shout him out, but he synthesized DMT.
Right. Is that the one that was on Lex Friedman's podcast?
No, he was on Rogan's
podcast. That's right. We just spoke about that.
But what set you down this path of psychedelics to begin with? Because DMT is like the king of the psychedelics, I would say. I think that's fair to say.
It's fair to say. It's more like, I feel like it's the progenitor, is that a good word? I don't know. The origin almost. It's like the root. If you're gonna go there, that's the best road to take, I feel like, because it's short. In real time, it's like 5 to 10 minutes. So you're there and then you're back, and you're not drunk or hungover, or
there's no come down.
No, not really. Maybe for 30 seconds you're out of it. You're like, oh, I'm back, right? What did I just see? Wow. And you're trying to retain all of that information and process it, which is very difficult in and of itself. It's like trying to cram a terabyte hard drive into a tiny like megabyte SD card. It's just
Yeah,
very hard.
It's just not enough room.
Exactly. That's what
Yeah.
it feels like. And not enough, I don't know if RAM's the right word, maybe for the technical audience, just like random processing power. There's all this random information to
Yeah.
sort through, and it just felt very, not, again, it's just words don't do it justice. It's,
But it's a dope drug.
it,
But, so wait, what started this whole
what started this? So I guess I've dabbled with psychedelics a lot. I've taken a lot of acid. I've done salvia many times.
Oh, really?
I've done mushrooms once, but I took a
Yeah.
rather large dose.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. We actually talked
Oh,
about that because
yeah,
I said
that's a funny story.
I said I've taken it twice, and you said, "Oh, I've done it once," and I was like, "Oh, really? How'd you like it?" And you said that your first time doing mushrooms, which was just a few weeks ago, I believe, you're like, wasn't fun for you.
No, I
But you
didn't.
took a big dose.
Yeah, I took like 4.2 grams, I believe, and I also did a small bump of coke, which I never do, but I did. Just why not, right? YOLO. Who knows? Whatever. And then I also smoked a lot of pot, and what else did I do? I took 3 hits of DMT to the face, and this was all
While you were on the mushrooms. Oh shit, dude, you fucking were going ham.
Well, this was actually before I did the mushrooms, so I should have said that first, but I forgot. Yeah.
Just to preface all this, like before the show, we're like, "Oh, let's, you want to smoke out your bong?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure." And I pack it, and every time I smoke with somebody, it's like, "Oh, it like one packed bowl of a bong will last like 3 hits, 2 hits at the least." And this dude just like freaking rips it, like the whole thing. And he's like, "Oh, you don't do that?" And I'm like, Jesus Christ. It took me like 2 tries, 2.5 tries to get the whole thing. And I'm just like, Jesus. I was like, yeah, it's been a minute since I've had to deal with something like this. But yeah, you have a very high tolerance from what I can tell.
I do.
That's
but
what I'm trying to
surprisingly, in my circle of friends, I'm the one who, like you, usually can't finish their bowls. But it's funny. But yeah,
but
I forgot.
Sorry, we were talking about the mushrooms and how you took 4.2 and you did 3 DMT.
So
trips.
I got to get the order right. I should also mention I took a rather large edible today, so I'm a little faded. But
yeah, he took a 500 milligram, which homebrew.
Yeah, homebrew. The homie hooked me up, and boy, yeah, let me tell you.
So yeah, man, 500. I've not taken 500. We were just talking about that, but I've not taken 500 in a long time. But let's get back on track.
Right. Okay. So
don't worry, I'll be the train.
First, okay, I think I smoked several bowls first from a bong, and then of pot, and then did a small bump of coke, which again I never do, but
yeah,
fuck it, why not, right? Yeah. And then I did 3 hits of DMT, which
and a lot of pot.
Yeah, and so I do not recommend doing DMT and coke. That's just not a good mix, especially for your first time. But again, if you're feeling brave, it can be fun, but I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you it wasn't the best idea. And then after that, I think I had a couple beers maybe. Yeah, and then I took 4.2 grams of mushrooms, which I didn't realize was a lot. I thought it was a reasonable amount, but my friend later told me that's like a really large amount. The same friend who handed me like a 2.5 gram stalk, right? Or that's what you call a mushroom stalk, yeah. And then just I grabbed the cap too, and then I just ate them both whole. And he's like, jaw dropped, and he's like, "What the fuck? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "What? You said eat it." I meant like, and he's like, "I meant a little at a time. I didn't mean all at once." And I was like, "Oh,
yeah," because it tastes pretty bad.
It tastes like sunflower seeds to me. I don't know, but
tastes nasty.
My friend almost threw up, so I was like, "Oh, I don't know."
Well, I've never thrown up from it, but I mean, I
should
heard that
say,
a lot
though,
of people have.
Interestingly enough, was this before or after? I had COVID a few weeks before that, and I'd recovered. So I think by that point, my sense of taste was still recovering. That might have had something to do with it. Probably did.
Well, let's not just brush over that. Did it hit you hard?
Yes, it took a little while, and it wasn't. My friends all told me it would be kind of like acid LSD, but it was very different. For me, it was like very primal, very like LSD feels like you're
Well,
kind
no, I
of.
meant COVID. Did COVID hit
Oh,
you hard?
oh, okay, okay. That no, it didn't hit me hard. Sorry, I thought you
Yeah.
meant the mushrooms.
But yeah, the mushrooms hit you hard. Okay, sorry.
It's all
So it
good.
felt like like 3 LSD tabs. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll answer both questions. COVID, hit me very hard for the first 48 hours. I had like a 103.8 fever, I believe, or 102.8. Yeah, I went up and down for a bit, and then I kept saying like, oh, should I go to the ER? And I was like, nah, I'll just I'll take my chances. I'll be safe. I'll stay at home. I'll take my fluids. I'll hydrate. I'll take a fever reducer, and I monitored my temperature. Communicated with my doctor. And in 48 hours, I was better. But at night, it was significantly worse. During the day, I could get up and move around. I was very sore. My headache was the worst part. It was just the worst headache I've ever had. I couldn't process information. I couldn't think. I could just lie in bed and just be like, moaning and groaning.
Yeah. I've heard similar stories from other people where they're just bedridden and nothing can like fix it. They don't want to hear anything. They just want to lay in bed and rest.
Yeah, it was not fun. But if I would say it's the second sickest I've ever been. I've had a flu that was worse, but it was pretty bad. I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't want to experience it again. I wouldn't want anyone I know to go through it, but it wasn't the end of the world. It was, you quarantine, right? You recover and then you get back to your life. But it wasn't a good experience,
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
I
nothing you
have
wish
been.
upon your friend
Yeah, exactly.
or an
But
enemy.
exactly. But I was thankful for the immunity. I think you have immunity for a few months after is what the research I've seen shows. So that's always a
Yeah, I
good
think
thing.
it's
Yeah.
like 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Which I wish that's kind of a big gap. So I wish there was a more concrete answer, but I guess
So how did the mushroom trip hit you? So
The
you said
mushroom
like
trip,
3 LSD.
it felt like 3 tabs of acid if I had to compare them. But acid feels more like techno, right? Whereas that's a strange word to use, and then the mushrooms is more like folk music. You know what I mean? Just more like more human in a way. It felt more like acid. Kind of always felt alien to me. Like I was kind of experiencing something that was otherworldly, like an alien spaceship, kind of. Whereas mushrooms felt like I was just like an animal with all my filters gone, and I could just say or think anything, and it felt very uninhibited.
How was for me, my first time doing it, was very visual heavy, where like I would look at the wall and then everything would change. Was that very visual heavy for you?
Only the closed eye visuals on mushrooms, especially closed eye mushrooms, were ridiculous. Just like, I don't know if you've ever seen like a Tool album cover.
Yeah, I've seen Tool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, similar imagery. Like
Really?
Yeah, like flaming eyes and like faces, fractals, and it just very
I remember for me it was very like growing leaves.
growing leaves. Yeah, lots
But- so
of
it's very
nature
interesting-
stuff too.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I was in nature, so it's very interesting for you to say that it was flames.
Flames, yeah, flames. When I say flames, I don't mean like fire, literally. More like I hate this word too, but like an aura, like a emanating sort of energy, like maybe a plasma is a better word. I don't know, but something that you don't see normally, right? But you kind of like can tell from looking at it, like, oh, this looks like intense, right? So, and every time I've done a psychedelic, I have very intense closed eye visuals. I don't know if that's what everyone experiences, but for me, that's pretty normal. Yeah.
Oh, I don't on acid.
Really?
No, closed eye visuals, but maybe because I'm usually have my eyes open. So my eyes get pretty tired.
You never
when I'm
really
on LSD.
Okay.
Because I'm usually try to be active. I'm out in nature hiking, so I just like keep going. One time I like played video games on acid, like the screen was melting, and I felt like I was like one with the game. But like, no,
I've played Skyrim on acid, and it was one of the better trips I've had. It was. I recommend it if
felt
you're
like
into
one
that.
with it.
I felt like I was my character, which was interesting. It was more like I felt like I was controlling my body, which was controlling another body, which was like doing stuff in Skyrim. It was
Basically, what VR tries to emulate.
yeah. So I can only imagine. I have yet to
Mhm.
try VR on acid, but I imagine
Yeah.
that's something else. That's
And another thing that you and I started talking about, like about a week ago, I had seen some news about that GameStop was trending in the news, and then I saw you right after that. I saw that, and you were telling me like, yeah, all my stocks down.
yeah.
I don't know what's going on.
yeah.
And, you
Bro,
know,
that day.
Wall Street bets.
Yeah, literally. So I've used Reddit for a while, and I've been aware of Wallstreetbets for some time. And in the Reddit community, it's kind of like, or at least it was, a bit of a joke. You know, you'd be like, oh, you go over there if you want to gamble on the stock market and watch people lose all their money. Or at least that was my impression. And it's crazy to think that now they practically own GameStop, and the fact that these large hedge funds have shorted GameStop and now have to cover their bets in the sense that they now
Have you seen how much these hedge funds have lost? Sorry to interrupt, but just to put the number out there,
I don't know the exact number.
70
but
billion.
that's enormous.
That's how much these hedge funds have lost.
Yeah, and this
Stick it to the man.
this is the first time I think in history we've seen something like this happen, which is crazy now that the SEC is getting involved, but that makes sense. You know, it's a big deal. They're probably, you know, as Tim Dillon put it, they have their feet to the fire. Robinhood, I should say, when I say they, shut down trading for regular people like you or me who were trying to, you know, go toe to
That was to
toe.
protect its own interests.
Exactly.
Not even to protect necessarily hedge funds. It was just because they wanted to protect their own
Well,
because they were selling stocks that they didn't have, correct? Or do you want to explain it?
the shorting the stocks.
Yes.
So shorting the stocks is basically betting that the stock's value is going to go down and you're going to profit off of that. But if the opposite happens, which is what happened in this case, right? The Reddit users were like, hey, why don't we just buy all of this stock? And there's a lot of podcasters out now talking about this, but this is truly fascinating. They actually did this. They went out there and they went fair and square on a publicly traded app, a platform that anyone can use, and they made the value of the stock, you know, fair market, supply and demand, skyrocket to the moon, to Mars, which is kind of the meme. And even Elon Musk got in on the hype, you know, and everyone's been talking about this. It's amazing to see. And with a name like Robinhood, right, you would think that they would have kind of a sense of this whole
It's poetic justice.
Yes, what this is all about, in the sense that we're not going to let them keep rigging the system. Why can't we do the same thing, right? If they can short a stock with millions of dollars, why can't we pool our funds and kind of...
But then the truth about Robinhood came out because
Yes, which is fascinating.
yeah, that they advertise themselves as they're working for the client because they're helping you buy stock and showing you all the stock market things, making it easy for an everyday person to make money off the stock or even watch the stock and understand it. But what they don't tell you is that they're actually selling your data of what you're buying to hedge funds and other places so that they can see
Mainly
what you're
Citadel
buying.
Capital, I believe it's called. Yeah,
That's the name of the company that owns Robinhood, but they sell it out.
Or
So they sell
they
your
buy the
information
info,
to people so that they know what to invest in, so they know what the market's doing.
Yeah.
So they can
and
make money off of us buying our stock and basically fuck us more.
market movements, and all that. And it's...
And what's really interesting is, and I found out from you because apparently it was on Tim Dillon said it, that Ghislaine Maxwell's daughter.
He said the CEO of Robinhood is Ghislaine Maxwell's son, which, what the heck, who knew? Tim
Very
Dillon,
sketch.
apparently, yeah. But
Very sketch. Very sketch.
very sketch.
But so what's going on with the market now, or what have you invested in, or do you keep an eye on Wall Street bets? What's going on with all that? Can you please explain that?
I should say I've since moved from Robinhood to Fidelity and TD Ameritrade, but my biggest position, if I'm being honest, is Tesla. My second is Microsoft. My third is Amazon. And that's just my top three. I have a lot of stocks that I hold, but I do fractional shares because I don't like to put all my eggs in certain baskets, right? I split everything up and I distribute and allocate to diversify in what I think makes sense, and that varies. But so I always look at the trends, I look at the volume, I look at the earnings, I look at, all the data I can get my hands on, put it in a sometimes I'll have a graph, sometimes I'll do like a what's it called? Excel document, something like that, and I'll just sometimes both if I have the time.
What do you think this what the repercussions for this will be? Like, what's the future now? What does it hold for showing that the people have this kind of power? Give us another stimulus check. Let's make Blockbuster go up. Let's make what other companies that have.
Well, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this, and I think that's why people are leaving Robinhood, because they want to get in on the action, and they know that Robinhood is going to restrict that, like they have been doing, which is, I think, illegal.
Which is why you're moving to Fidelity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's to protect their own interests in what they're selling and what they're doing. Because Citadel, lost how much? Like 53% of their.
So much. I don't know the exact numbers, but a lot. And the crazy thing is, they'd rather go through all of this, pay those fines, and do all of that than actually cover the short, which would be a tremendous amount more. And I think they're not going to stop shorting companies, so it's going to keep happening. And people are going to, like they try to do it with silver, they try to do it with Nokia, AMC, GameStop. It's going to keep happening. It's only a matter of like timing and organization. So
yeah, coordinating it.
If they
and it's funny when they call them hackers and stuff.
Yeah, because that's the thing. To say someone is hacking the stock market, right? That would require a tremendous amount of effort and technology and sophistication to get away with.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure someone does that. But it's not something you really hear about, right? But if someone did that, it would be a really, really big deal, right? This is not that. This is people like you or me just going on an app and then just being like, oh, I want to buy this stock. I want to buy that stock. I want to hold. I want to sell. I want to just free market, normal everyday capitalism, right? And they were like, no, you can't do that.
And it's very funny to see the amount of people, because I even have my girlfriend's friend who bought stock when it was cheap. And now, when it was at the highest point, he was still not selling it. He's like, we need to hold the line. It was like,
yeah,
like these people were just like, hey, we're on a mission to like stick it to the man. Like, fuck you.
It's fascinating to me how like Reddit is now this like well-known site, right?
Yeah, well, they always have some sort of thing that comes up, but this is the biggest for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of made Reddit go viral in a way where everyone's like, oh, Reddit, what is Reddit? What is Wallstreetbets? What's a and then they start looking around and they're like, oh, I see it. And I think it's kind of interesting to see people want to organize and take on the financial institutions and investment firms and hedge funds and this kind of thing in this way, right? Because it impacts everything. Everyone who has a lot of money has investments. And a lot of people who invest use a broker, and these brokers know what they're doing. They know how to short a company and make tremendous amounts of money and use different tactics that are, not something every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you know the system.
Yeah, exactly. And now that people have access to this information and the tools and the time now, because we're all kind of sitting at home, a lot of us anyway, right? With some free time, we don't know what to do with, and we're like, why not? Let's invest. Let's see what happens, right? Let's jump in on the bandwagon. And a lot of people are making money. A lot of people are making not so good decisions. The difference is, I think, in impulsivity, timing, and research. If you can, balance everything and know what you're getting into, you can make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and people realize that. And I think that's why Robinhood is doing this crampdown. They don't want to have to cover that short.
Yeah, and so what have you invested in, or have you made any money off of this? Or because I know another thing that was going up when it came to cryptocurrency was Dogecoin. It went up like from being worth absolutely nothing,
which is a interesting discussion too. I feel like it should be a separate discussion in the sense that crypto and stocks and like ETFs, mutual funds, that kind of thing are very, very different. Cryptocurrency is crypto, right? So it's cryptographic. It's coded. You can't hack it. I guess you can, but it's very, very difficult. It's not like most stocks either, in the sense that, you mine it, you trade it. It's not something you just have in cash value. You can't. Most banks won't take it. It's very different, right? It's kind of got this kind of negative vibe to it because a lot of people will use it for shady things like online black market kind of dealings, right?
Mhm.
But it's interesting that people decided to do the same thing in a sense with Dogecoin. They took something that had little to no, value or interest, and then they turned it into something that had a tremendous amount of both. And it's gone up and down, and it's really interesting to see people research and get into this kind of stuff and learn how to go toe to toe with the big boys, the people who this is their livelihood, and now they've got all this competition they don't know what to do with, and their only resort was to restrict it, which is very sad to see.
Which is something they've never done. They've never asked for restrictions. They've always wanted everything open, and now that this happened, they're like, no, we need restrictions. We need to change the game.
Like, this is supposed to be America, right? We're supposed to be all about free market and fairness and equality. And how is it that if they short a company and then have to cover their bets, they can restrict trading, right? That doesn't follow. And then if they were to do
they want to roll the dice in
the
their favor.
opposite, right? It would.
Sorry, but keep explaining. Sorry.
No, it wasn't. It's all good. It's if the tables were turned, right? They would have their way. There's no way we would, everyday people could win against these billions and billions and billions of dollars, trillions even.
Yeah. And it's just like them trying to keep their foot on the neck of the war.
Yeah, just the everyday person, trying to get ahead.
I forgot where I heard this, but it was like, it's like having a slave owner who tells his slave you'll never be able to have a slave.
That's one way to look at it. I'm not sure I agree with the analogy.
Yeah,
but
I forgot exactly how the analogy went. We're going to cut it. No, just kidding.
But I would say that it's a lot like maybe owning a company and then telling someone they can't own a company,
Yeah.
And then that they can only own a company if it's on their terms and on their just by their whims, right? And
but I mean, there are companies that do that kind of thing, because for example, I remember finding out that lots will make agreements, like shopping centers and stuff. They'll make like an agreement, like for example, where we are, like, we're the only coffee shop that can be here. So there's only Starbucks, for example. We'll make it that kind of agreement. So then you'll be like, how come this is the only Starbucks in the plaza? Like versus this plaza has like maybe 2 or 3 different spots, or maybe like a coffee bean and some other stuff. It's like, because Starbucks just buys it all out. So then they have no competition and they dominate.
Right. And you see that happen all the time with large companies, corporations. They become monopolies, right? And anytime you have
finding those types of loopholes, being able to make those agreements, it's like, should they be allowed to make that agreement, or should it be a free market where they could be like, hey, if you want competition, they're going to be right there.
This is a deep and nuanced conversation, in my opinion, because on the one hand, right, you have a company like, say, Amazon, right, where they have trillions of dollars, they get trillions of dollars in business, they do pretty much the majority, I feel like, of online sales, right? I don't think that's a stretch to say. And when you have a company like that, it's almost like, is it possible that they have too much reach, that they're too big? Like people can say, is Google too big, right? Well, see, and that's, my Google phone just went off. And okay, that's a topic in and of itself. Okay.
No worries.
I hate that. I should turn that off, actually. But yeah, our phones are always listening, right? And that's a whole nother topic. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
What was I talking about? Okay, Amazon. Is it possible for a company like Amazon or Microsoft or whatever company, I don't want to just pick on one, to have too much power, to have too much influence, to have too much market share? Is that possible? Is that a bad thing if that happens?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're all for a free market, right? Is it possible that at one point it becomes an unfair market where one person just dominates, or one company, and no one else can compete?
Doesn't make it hard for anything to break through.
Yeah, if you have a ceiling that's too high, right? Not a ceiling, just like a foothold that's too high, no one else can get up there, right?
Well, I think it's different though when you're finding rules to keep the competition down.
Yeah,
Because
that's
you
a
have
lot
so
more.
much capital. If you
Mhm.
have so much money to be like incentivize these owners of these properties to be like, hey, guess what? I'll pay you this much if you make sure no other coffee shop is allowed here.
Yes, and
And it's like, oh, at the same time they should be allowed to, but it's like, it
well,
makes it
here's
hard.
the thing.
I guess that's regulations because that even goes to the Wall Street thing, right?
Yeah, how much regulation should be involved is one question, right? Another is regulation better? Is it less regulation would make the problem worse, right? But more regulation means more funds allocated. It means more overhead, of course. More just it becomes a headache, right, for people involved, and then people don't want to do that, and the question becomes: is it necessary? So I think the argument is yes, and I know a lot of people would disagree and say, in a free market, there should be no restrictions, there should be no nothing, right? Just like with Robinhood, we don't want restrictions, right? On everyday normal occurrences. But if you have something where a corporation is not allowing fair competition in a free market where you can't, you just can't compete, right? How is it possible to say that that's okay and that that's fair? Because sure, they succeeded, they did their best, they made a gigantic titan of a corporation, right? That whatever. But at the same time, how are other people? So there's only so much market share, right? If other people can't break off a bit and get in there and make their living, do they have to work for that same corporation? Does there just be one monopoly giant that can just do whatever they want? That's kind of like being the king of any business or any market.
Well, that's why the internet's so powerful, though, because you have these people that can back something up and bring it up to power. Like, look at like MySpace versus Facebook, for example. You have MySpace, which was like the big dominant giant, but because they were owned by a corporation, they sold out, right? They couldn't do any changes, so they stagnated. That's a very good
point. I feel
right?
Like corporations,
and then Facebook was like, oh, we're innovating, and that's just straight up the internet market being like, yo, fuck MySpace. It's there's too many weirdos and too easy to be molested, and your apps suck. Versus Facebook's like, yo, we have third-party apps on here, like Farmville or something, or that what's that game with the chocolates and the gems and stuff? Candy Crush.
There you go.
Like you have all that stuff. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go over here. Plus, Facebook now is always updating their interface, so it's just like, okay, this is way more chill than MySpace.
Yeah, and
you see what I mean? So like that's like the internet dominating. That's like it coming together.
There's always
trends come,
new trends, new waves of what's popular, what's the new thing, the new innovative tech or app or whatever site.
So that's what I mean. It's like, so it's still kind of a free market, but it's like, how do you get those breakthroughs? Because on the internet, maybe it seems harder and harder as more and more things get discovered, or is it just, hey, the cream of the crop will be seen eventually?
Well, my argument isn't that it's not possible, but it is a lot harder, right? Because if you're going toe to toe with Google or Microsoft or Amazon or any of the big boys, right? How much harder is your path to becoming, someone who has a hold in the market? If you can't make ends meet as a small business owner, how are you supposed to get to that point, right? And, maybe it was easier in the past, but in our world today, it's not impossible, but it's definitely not the way it used to be. I think a lot of people would agree. So, and these companies have never existed before. There's never been like trillion-dollar companies, corporations. Corporations are now, like, I feel like there's a thin line between like a king, right, and the CEO of a large corporation. They can pretty much get away with doing whatever they want. I mean, it's fishy business, a lot of it. And I think people are starting to catch on and being like, hey, let's take some of this into our own hands. Let's see what we can do. I think that's a good thing.
And man, what was one of the first things that got us, you and me talking, was when we were like, oh yeah, like Joe Biden's gonna go in, or before he was inaugurated, and then there was like the storming of the Capitol.
Yeah, that.
And we were like, yo, that's nuts, man. That's some crazy shit.
It really
Like we
is.
were talking to each other while it was going on.
Yeah,
Early.
literally the Capitol was being raided, which is insane. I never thought that would happen. It's unbelievable. Even in the current state of, the United States, it's incomprehensible to think that we could allow something like that to happen, right? Where people literally stormed the Capitol and nothing, I feel like, was really done about it, right? These people just like stormed it and left, right? There was a fight, but there wasn't like a concerted effort to crack down on it immediately, which, why? That doesn't make sense to me, right? How is that different from like a terrorist raid? Because it's our own citizens. We don't treat that with like, that's a raid on the Capitol, right? If it's not justified, which who am I to say if it's justified or
Yeah,
not?
I
But
think the people died too.
yeah, most people I think would agree that it was not a good thing to do. It was not justified.
I don't think anybody was happy about it.
Yeah, and
I think it's like Trump should, like, that shot any chance of him running again.
for sure, I would say. I think it's hard to argue unless you're like a devout Trump supporter, in which case, Godspeed. But I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah, after that, I'm like, yo, that's it.
I think it's more realistic that his son would run, Trump Jr. maybe, or
That seems crazy to me.
maybe what's his son-in-law's name? I forget. The one who married his daughter.
I mean, I see Kamala, and then for maybe Ted Cruz.
All right, Jared Kushner. But yeah, Ted Cruz, I don't think has it in him anymore. I think Mark Rubio is a better Republican candidate. Honestly, I
would want who's the guy with the eye patch?
I was gonna say, I hope he runs.
Dan Crenshaw.
There you go, Dan Crenshaw. I can't believe I lapsed there, but yeah,
fucking,
I love him. I would vote for him.
I always hear fucking Joe Rogan say, "Oh, you only know 150 names." I'm like, I know way more than 150 names.
That's pretty accurate. Your brain, I from what I've seen online, can only hold so much information.
As a musician, bro, I feel like there's so much more that I can hold. Like so many.
You can hold a lot.
Names,
It's hard
so
to recall it accurately all the time, right? Because if you're in like a certain setting where you feel certain information is pertinent, right? You'll more easily recall that information. But if you have some stuff in the back of your mind, like out of sight, out of mind, right? You might have a harder time just like
grabbing it.
Yeah. Right? It's like a filing cabinet where the files are all over the ground and you're just trying to sort them into the filing cabinet. I feel like, or at least my brain feels like that sometimes.
I don't know. I guess so, but I'm pretty good with names. Like, even my girlfriend's like, man, your memory's really good. And I'm like, I guess, but I just don't realize it. Yeah, I just remember a lot of shit.
I wish
pointless shit though. I guess it's just like my ADD side, I guess.
Maybe.
But bro, it's been about an hour.
Yeah, we're kind of all over the place, but it's interesting.
No, yeah, man. No, it was a pleasure, man. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
Pizza in a second. Yeah, man. Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Eli. It's been a pleasure. And we're going to chill for a cool minute. But thanks. It's been another episode of the TV Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Bye.